This is the last in that series, and we're going to be looking at land use and forestry and agriculture, or chapter 6 and 7. So what's the plan for this morning? Or I should say a bit of housekeeping to start with. The first thing is, please put your phone, your mic and your camera on mute, so we minimize the broadband use. And I also wanted to let you know that this is being recorded, and it will be made available, both the video and the slides, on the Scottish Engineering website, the cluster, if you go to Net Zero. So without further ado, I'm just going to keep going and go through our itinerary this morning, which we looked at the program so far and what we've been doing. We'll go to the survey as a reminder to that, because that was a source of how we developed the methodology for all those chapters reviews. And then we'll go into it looking at the land use and agriculture chapter, specifically 6 and 7, and doing through the discover, define, develop and deliver, which is related to innovation, opportunity, skills and roadmaps. So that's the agenda for this morning. After the innovation piece, we'll take a 5-minute break. So what's the support program made of? So we've had a series of webinars, and this is webinar 6, and it's looking at chapter 6 and 7. But we're also offering one-to-one support to companies, and that's more dedicated to where they are on our path to net zero and how we can support organizations in developing these. And so far we've had 45 one-to-one sessions. So there's plenty of support available, and please don't hesitate to reach out for it. We can also provide support in-house in terms of either coming and visiting you or supporting your communication, either with your shop floor or with your C-suite or managers. So we're happy to support, and that's the program. The idea of the methodology came from a survey we did at the end of webinar 2, and from that we've developed a series of webinars, and that's why you can see webinar 3, 4, 5 and 6, and this is webinar 6, the last one on land use and forestry. And we also developed a methodology based on discover or innovations. There was a keen interest to understand what innovations were in Scotland, in the UK and further afield, looking at opportunities. And in here we're looking at what projects are ongoing, skills. Once you've defined the innovation you want to do, you've identified the opportunity, do you have the skills, and how do you develop those skills? And finally, when you've put all that together, you're delivering your roadmap to get there when you want to get there. So those were the 4 pillars we looked at. So to develop a vision, we need to discover. Discover was the innovation piece, and it was innovation in Scotland, in the UK, and the rest of the world. And then once you go innovation, you need the motivations. And for that, we looked at the opportunities that are driven by the Scottish Government, who wants to see outcomes. And to get the outcome, they are putting actions in place, and those actions are driving projects. So that gives you the motivation and defining that motivations. But you also need to develop that solutions when you've got the vision and motivation. And for that, you need capabilities. And that's where we looked at skills. The need for skills, and how you say skills, and how you fund skills. So that's the development piece, and we work strongly with CESAP. And finally, you need a roadmap. So when you've identified the capability, the skills you need, is how you get there. And we talked about ISO, and we'll see other opportunities here. So in terms of pathway, tools, process, and funding. So that's the methodology we've used to date. And that's the methodology we're going to use today. So we're going to look today specifically on chapter 6 and 7, but we're going to look at it from an engineering perspective. So it's not about, today is not about looking at it and becoming farmers or foresters or working in the sea, on the seashores. It's about, how can the engineering world support the ambitions of the farming, agriculture, land use world. And why those two chapters? Well, they are quite important because one, agriculture is a big emitter. As you can see here, those are 2018 numbers. But agriculture is a big emitter, but at the same token, land use is a big sink. So it's a both extremes you're looking at. It's a big emission, but also big captures. So that's what we're going to look at. And as for every other chapters, I've designed icons to highlight the opportunity, if you want. And in terms of woodland, in terms of land use, this is the land use. So one is about woodland, and it's about the creation of it. It's about restoration of peatland. And you've also got high value farming, and here you need to think about sustainability, emission, biofuel. Planning is a lot about soil disturbance, and last but not least is a blue economy, and it's leveraging basically the fact that I think the Scotland sea mass, if you want, is 6 times land mass. So how do you leverage that? In terms of agriculture, icons are about farming for a better climate. And by that, you need to think about regenerative agriculture. You need to think about, knowledge exchange, support, networks. It's how you've got interaction within those sectors, exchange of informations. You need to think about also, because of the trend toward urbanizations, you need to think about, farmers and crofts that want to retire, and maybe an opportunity there is on ETS. We will talk about that. And in terms of agriculture and emissions, you've got the nitrogen, you've got methane through emission from livestock. And obviously in agriculture, in the term of exploitation, here you've got woodland and peatland. So those are the icons for today. So I've really summarized here. That's how I'm going to present you with the innovations. So we'll see if it's Scotland, the UK, or further afield, the chapter related to, and the opportunity is tapping into, with the brief description on innovation. So to start with, I will start with IGS, not only because they are the winners of our award this year, but because really they tick just about every boxes you want to take into the land use and agriculture. They do something that every farmer will dream of, is control the environment, control the climate. And that's really what people are trying to do, and optimize growth. And they do that without using, fertilizer. They do that without using pesticides. So in this case, you're looking at urbanization, vertical farming. So your takeaway is no land use, no transportation, no pesticide. Think about it if you were changing your city car park into vertical farming in town. That's what you're looking at, no transport. So definitely a good innovation. Another one is about tracks. And the innovation here is about being able to support the land use, the forestry, the agroforestry, and support it in the sense of developing, a technology and innovation that allow not to build new forest road. New forest roads are just too expensive. So how do you manage, ease, and support the forestry industry in managing those forests when the access it can be limited? And in Scotland especially, you're looking at steep, rocky or boggy areas. So the idea here is you support the industry without the cost and the environmental cost of building the infrastructure that goes with it. Another innovation is Oceanium, and what you're looking at here is the blue economy. And again, you're looking at kelp, and you're going away from land use, and kelps are fantastic nitrogen and CO2 sinks. There's no need for fresh water, and you ensure biodiversity because they provide sanctuary for sea life. So that's an area of interest is in manufacturing, or I would say cultivating, farming the sea. So that's the innovation. Another one in terms of land use is BrewDog, and in these cases related to ETS. They basically bought land they've promised to reforest, and peatland they promised to restore, but mainly they're going to be using those their own ETS, so to make sure they become what they say carbon negative, and then they have a choice. The choice being to claim to be carbon negative, or to possibly sell that negativity on to other businesses. So the innovation here is about creating your own ETS. So in the case of BrewDog, they are buying land, but you can imagine, like we mentioned the Holy Grail at the last webinar. You can imagine if you've developed a technology that absorb CO2, then you may be able, by building an array, to create your own ETS, and then selling that on as credit. Another innovation is about wood, and that's more on the building and engineering side. Again, we're looking at those innovations from an engineering side, and the idea here is how you can increase the use of wood as a sustainable construction material. And the reason for that is we're going to be planting a lot of trees. The Scottish Government is looking at 18,000 hectares a year from 2024 onwards. And what you're going to do with all that wood, because if you burn it, you're just going to end up releasing the CO2. And the idea is to look at wood as a building material. So that's the innovation here, is using all that wood to become a building material, which is proving to be high performance and delivering a lesser weight than other material, and allow you to build faster. It would be something new in Scotland, or new-ish in Scotland, but it wouldn't be in the US, for example, where a lot of houses are built. Going it slightly further afield, and again, it's in the UK, and here the idea of biocarbon engineering is about planting. So again, supporting the forestry industry, and is how you can plant using drones. That's what they are using. So you're thinking about forestry 4.0 here. And the idea is you can build, or you can plant tree a lot faster than you would normally if you do the traditional way of people going around and planting trees. And it's how you can develop the drones and the systems to support that, and the survey, and we'll come back to that, but using drone to survey what you're using. So think about here forestry 4.0. In this innovation, it's about two things: using water as a space rather than for exploitation. And if you think in Scotland, all those loch that are just empty, and I've talked about Biwa when they were looking at building solar panel on water, on lakes. In here, what you're looking at is floating hydroponic unit. So again, it's floating, so it's not using land. It's hydroponics, so it's not using any soil neither, so there's no soil disturbance. And it's using a space which isn't land. It could be loch, it could be the seaside. And what makes it interesting in that sense is then you can use the land for forestry, you can use the land to do more carbon capture. So that's the innovation here. In the term of hydroponic and continuing on that projects, then there is again the idea of how can you do that in your own house, and that's an open source system, and you can grow your plants hydroponic in an hydroponic fashion, so there is no soil. If there's no soil, there is no soil disturbance. It's at home, so because it's at home, there is no transportation, and it's, as I said, it's open source. So it's available to anybody and everybody. So again, that's another innovation. And if you can't do it at home, then you've got supermarket jumping on the bandwagon and looking at using their car park space, because remember of that trend to urbanizations and people leaving the country to live in cities, and how do you leverage all that? So in this case, they are just growing on their car park, something very similar to IGS, basically. You can imagine that's how it would be. They're using containers, but there's no transportation. There's total freshness, and you're using urban space. And talking about urban space, for example, look at Green Bailey, who's looking at developing, and that's more further afield, outside the UK, but developing, if you want, a way to deliver food using end of buildings, is because the end of buildings are no use in the urban space, and how can you use those to deliver a new, if you want, to deliver food, sorry, and what you've got here, the freshness is no transportation again, so in this case you're using soil, it's not hydroponic. But you can see how you can use organic waste, and the people living in the building can enjoy that food coming from next door, essentially. So that's the side of, if you want, urbanization and how you can leverage all these. In terms of the marine side and land use, and in this case, you think about land not used. And then again, from an engineering point of view, you're looking at drone, and in here you've got Marine Bioenergy has developed what they call a kelp elevator. And the idea about it is, how do you grow kelp away from the coast? Because in deep ocean, because otherwise at the moment most of the kelp is grown near the shore. And if you wanted to use all that water space, how do you do it? And what they've developed is basically the idea that nutrient at the bottom of the sea, but light is at the top of the sea. So they've got drone that drag those nets, those elevators, if you want. And in the evening or during the night, they go deep for the kelp to be able to eat the nutrients and collect the nutrients. And during the day, they go up to get the lights to help the kelp grow. So that's the idea about the elevator, and it's managed by drone. So from an engineering point of view, you're thinking about drone, you're thinking about big data, you're thinking how do you control these, and the drone can bring those nets back ashore at the end of the cycle. So that's the innovation here. Another innovation, again, if you think about land use 4.0, and if you think about automations, it's about harvesting automatically using what they see a sea combine harvester, they call it, but it's capable of harvesting in an automated fashion, so no human involved, and to replant or reseed at the same time. So it's harvesting and replanting automatically. And if you think about automations, then the other area is drone for supporting forestry. And the idea here is obviously Forestry 4.0 and how you can use robotic drones to look at the health of your forest. So you don't need to send people in. You can do an analysis from up, and you can go and look at areas where access may not be straightforward, but you can measure your biomass, you can look at your inventory, your preservations of your wood forest and the health of it. So again here, think about from an engineering point of view, you're looking at, again, 4.0 big data, and you're looking at drone technology, or what can you do, automation to replace human. That's been a common theme we've been looking at agriculture. And again, continuing on the theme of automations, this is a project that was run by Harper University, and what they have done here is what we call agriculture 4.0, which is autonomous farming. So they've basically farmed and exploited a field without any human intervention. Those equipment were automated. So that was the harvester, the planting, the tractors, all of these with autonomous vehicles, and they were using autonomous vehicle and drone to demonstrate that they could cultivate, they could farm fields without human intervention. Then going on agriculture and livestock, then again, you've got agriculture 4.0 with RFID. And the idea here about RFID is how you can measure animal health using RFID to measure animal health through their feeding behavior and possibly identify the one that are unwell very quickly and very accurately. So here again, that was done with Newcastle University in the UK, but think about 4.0, think about big data, RFID, and how you can help. And in terms of agriculture 4.0, one of the big emissions from livestock is methane. And the reason it's a big emission, not in quantity, but methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So that's why people are working so hard in minimizing methane, CH4 emission from livestock. And in this case, what they've developed, again, is a system that capture that methane, but also can provide information on disease location, the success of inseminations. So you get information, big data coming to you straight from a given cow, a given animal, as well as catching methane and minimizing methane. So, and in terms of minimizing methane, the other innovation by Better Dairy is they are doing milk, dairy product, but they are doing dairy product without the cow. And it's not about a plant milk, another kind of plant milk. They are making true milk, but by using yeast to make each component of milk, and then blending those components to deliver the taste and the look and the feel and the benefit of milk. But they're doing all this without using any cow, sorry. So you can see here the takeaway from it is to create a world where humans are vegan without even realizing they are vegan, because it tastes and look and feel the same, but it didn't use any cow in the process. T-branch, that's another, and what those guys are looking at is, right, what can we do with the carbon we've captured? And what they are looking at is making proteins that can get fed to livestock, but making the protein from the ground, the greenhouse gas that's been captured. So if you think about carbon capture and utilization and storage, CCUS we talked about, this is how it is applied into the agriculture world, is capturing that carbon and changing that into protein and changing that into feedstock, I would say, and transforming that feedstock into protein through cows and beef and milk and that sort of thing. So that's allowed to solve two problems at once. You're basically using the carbon capture to produce food. Another interesting innovation for the refill is the use of insects, because insects are a great source of protein and good source of protein for animals and plants. And the same way we've been talking about IGS and vertical farming, in here you're looking at insect vertical farming. And it has a self-sustainability side to it, because you can just leave a level of the population to keep on reproducing. But that's a concept. So in here, what you're looking at is an alternative source of protein, pardon me, and fertilizer. Another innovation in terms of agriculture, it's about regenerative agriculture. And we talked about that. And here, what those guys have been looking at is what happened to those land when you put an array of solar panels, and normally nothing. So what they are developing in terms of regenerative agriculture is they use sheep to eat the grass when it's growing, and when the grass has been eaten, they use chicken and ducks to fertilize the land. And the chicken and duck also will enjoy the fact that the two things: A, the sheep have cleared the grass, and the other thing is they are also, if you want, pesticide because they eat all the insects. So that's the way it is regenerative. So it's a circle where you rotate, where you cultivate, or where you grow a farm. And the advantage also is that you're using the same land than solar panel, for example. So here you've got that regenerative agriculture, regenerative farming, which is becoming a big trend at the moment. If you think about robot and automations, then what those guys are looking at is robo-rooming, they call it, and it's about robotization, about replacing dog sheep to manage a flock of sheep. And you think about automation again and using or herd of sheep and automation and using robots. So it's robots instead of dogs here. That's what they are looking at. In this case, what they are looking at as well is about developing something. One of the big emitters is manure. And what do you do with the manure, and how do you implement circularity in these sectors? And what those guys have developed, again, think about it from an engineering point of view, but they develop a system that allows them to convert the waste, the manure, into fertilizer and nutrient-rich fertilizer. So you develop circularity, you develop a system that allows you to change and minimize the emissions. So that's the concept behind that. In here, this one is about wind turbine, and the idea behind that one is more, as I mentioned, about the ETS. And what do you do, if you've got land, but you want to retire, you want to stop farming it? So is there an opportunity in there to build an ETS? And the obvious one is planting tree, but tree needs to be managed. But another one is to develop an array of technology, and that could be one of those flower turbines. So what's the innovation here? Well, the innovation here is those are small. So the problem is everybody is happy to get wind turbine as long as it's not in their backyard. So the idea here is to develop something that looks good and feels good and is quite small and actually works very well next to each other's, and to be able to build an array and not face all those challenges that big wind turbine farm are currently facing. So that is innovation, but you can see here it's an engineering solution to a farming challenge. And here, the interesting thing, innovation here is about, now you're doing all that good stuff, regenerative farming, for example, or ETS or whatever, and how do you sell it? And that's what that platform, so develop a platform, again, think about deep data, thinks about how you support those industry. And what those guys have done, they've developed a platform that helps farmers sell their good practice. And in here, it's about regenerative land management and how you sell that. So it's not really an ETS anymore, but it gives you credit and then for developing good practice. So think again about the knowledge piece of it. And the exchange and the support that we were talking about it. So the innovation from an engineering point of view is more about developing the right platform that people can tap into and leverage. So if I look at innovations and agriculture 4.0, what area are we looking at? What's available today? You've got the techniques, the technologies, and I've mentioned the hydroponics, I've mentioned the kelps and algae, and the development of bioplastics. you've got also looking at, bringing the production next to where people consume, and looking at the trend of urbanizations, but also looking at the fact that transportation is a big emitter. You would have seen maybe or noticed it's the number one emission in 2018. So that's where you've got vertical and urban farming. And in terms of 4.0, you've got the big data, data analytics, you've got the drone technology, the Internet of Things, and precision agriculture, which is also very strongly linked to the vertical farming. So those things are already today to some extent, but those are the space where there is opportunities to do something. And if you want to look at further afield or further ahead, I would say, then you can think about, a big one is desert agriculture. So a bit less relevant in Scotland, but more and more relevant is seawater farming. People are starting to think about how can they use seawater for farming because of the use of fresh water. Think about culture meat. So I've mentioned the dairy product, for example, or the idea of 3D printing food, which is already available. You could 3D print chocolate at the moment if you wanted to. And finally, it's all about big data again, artificial intelligence. It's about crowd farming. You can see that starting to come through, the use of nanotechnology. So those are a whole series of agriculture 4.0, the whole sectors that you could get inspired by and think about where the opportunities are. So what's the takeaway from that innovation sections? From an engineering manufacturing business, you need to look at land use or no use for that matter, and forestry and agriculture as opportunities as sectors to service. Say, what can you do to help them getting their net zero ambition from an engineering point of view? The other takeaway is think about it more than just land. So I've talked about urbanization a lot, and that's a big opportunity, and how you bring farming to the cities, but also, especially in Scotland, the blue economy. As I said, the marine zone is about 6 times the size of the landmass. So we've got a huge knowledge in Scotland through the oil and gas experience, and so can you pivot from an industry to another, leveraging that experience? And finally, in terms of ETS or emission trading scheme, then they offers opportunities, but they offer on two fronts. One is how you exploit them. So think about forestry, think about the trike example, but also how you create them. So think about the carbon capture, maybe the turbine and the tulips. So that sort of thing. So that's what we like to take away. So I think that'd be the end of that innovation piece. So I think it's time for maybe a 5-minute break.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, welcome back. I think we just finished the first part, which was about the vision, developing a vision for the discovery being innovations. And what we're going to be looking at now is a defined piece, and that's about developing a motivations and how we're going to drive that motivations, what are the projects. So looking at both chapters and starting with the land use and forestry one, what we need to realize is where the opportunity is going to come from. Well, the Scottish Government has defined outcomes they want to see delivered, and those outcomes are going to drive policies, and those policies are going to drive opportunities. And what are those outcomes? In land use, it's a lot about woodland creation, and it's also exploitation. But if you think about woodland creation, it goes into forestry. But it's also about peatland, and in terms of peatland, it's more about restoration than it is about exploitation. And that's another area. So on the use of wood products, so people realize that by enhancing all that woodland and those 18,000 acres a year, so they're going to need to find a way to use all that wood product and lock all that carbon away and not releasing it. And another one is establishment of those partnerships, and I come back to that, but it's really 5 partnerships that's been established in Scotland, and those are one of the area where there are opportunities for company to step in. So if you look at the actions of the government following the outcomes, it's really focused on woodland and forestry, and what agroforestry and what can be done into creating and exploiting forest. It's all about peatland and what can be done to, if you want to regenerate peatland and get some value out of it, as well as the carbon capture that it provides. And it's also about the blue economy. So the 3 area, farmland, forestry, woodland, peatland, and the blue economy. That's the 3 key areas you've got to think about. And an example of that are the regional land use partnerships. And in this case, I've taken the example of the Cairngorms. And they've got a series of ambitions, a series of targets, and how they're going to measure that. And the question is, how can you tap into those? So you can help from an engineering point of view in developing the woodland and the peatland. So think about the track again, or the boggy conditions, or exploiting the forest, exploiting the peatland, regenerative. Where can you help in those areas? So that's one of their ambitions, and how can you support that ambition? Another one of their target is active travel. So think about it from, you've got cycling, obviously, but how do you develop the infrastructure that comes with active travel? Because people want to be active, but don't want to give up on their, I would say, convenience, which, for example, is connections, and be able to put your phone out wherever you are and still get connections. So there is an idea of active travel, yes, but infrastructure that comes with active travel. And to get people active, then you need to provide the same convenience they're enjoying today in cities, if you want them out there. And finally, in terms of rural development, you're looking at the business perception of the rural area, and how can you help in that? And it could be by relocating in rural area, or developing the infrastructure that goes with it. And also, one of the big ones in terms of infrastructure is high-speed broadband. So if you look at the example of the Cairngorm, you're looking at, they've got 22 projects. They've got a funding of 43 million, which is quite significant. And they're looking at 2 stages, the 2 years and a 5-year stage, where after 2 years it's more about concept, and after 5 years it's more about the deliverable of the approach. So here's a type of projects, a type of program going on that may be of interest and maybe valuable. In terms of agriculture, so it's the same concept, i.e. the outcomes will drive the opportunities. And what outcomes are they looking for? Then they're looking at mitigation measures, which is the same concept about carbon capture, mitigation in terms of regenerative agricultures. They're looking at awareness, so and by that is exchange of information, support, knowledge. They're looking at agriculture 4.0 by minimizing nitrogen use, and that means fertilizer. Or how do you do meat and dairy without animals? And finally, you've got the idea of carbon sink and carbon capture. So that's the area, that's the outcomes they are looking for. So if you look at the actions that are driving those outcomes, it's about the biomass, biodiversity, better farming. If you want livestock, no fertilizer. So that would be the big one. It's about network and support and best practices and how knowledge is exchanged and how people, farmers are supported, especially with people moving to urban area. And it's about alternatives, and by that is land use or not use for that matter. No soil disturbance, so think about the sea again, think about vertical farming, think about the hydroponic systems. But there is a but, and the but is conditionality. So they are looking at providing all that support, driving all those actions, but they are going to make it conditional to a benefit, to a net zero benefit to the environment. So an example is the National Island Plan, and which they are looking at island becoming net zero. And out of that plan, I've picked up 3 objectives. So objective number 2, which is about economic development, is really about job creation. So a lot of the islands are about farming, they are about forestry, they are about agriculture. So how can you support that job creation, local job creation by people, with people, sorry, so no one left behind, that's what you want to think about. Or objective number 8 is about biosecurity, which is also biodiversity. So how can you support that? Again, making sure, so think about drawing and planting trees and going places that is hard to get if you are walking or for human to go. So how do you manage that biodiversity? And the objective number 9 is about mitigation, and it's how you mitigate climate change and how can you support that. So that's an area, if you want, or a project that may be of interest, but again, it's about serving those people. It's about serving, how can you tap into that and how you can use that as an opportunity. So the takeaway from the define is you've got opportunity to facilitate the projects. A project related to land use or not use, for that matter. If you think about use, it's woodland, peatland, regenerative. Not use would be about using the blue economy. Or using, hydroponic with no soil disturbance, or vertical farming. So there are projects here, there are opportunities in land use, and the one which has been through, for example, for the islands. So the idea is, whereas Scottish Engineering doesn't have many members within those 2 sectors, our members can have a big impact on those 2 sectors in supporting them reaching their ambition. If you look at the skill space, the develop, how do you make sure you've got the capability? What skills are needed? So in these sectors, then there's one which is the generic skills, and in there you would have the meta skills that we've talked about it, but those are true for all the chapters, and that's why it's a good thing, because you will have those skills in-house already. It's a case of pivoting those skills to those sectors. So, and one area where we can help, for example, and we've mentioned, is that carbon literacy is how do we support either the shop floor or the decision makers, the leaders, in understanding the value of net zero and the risk that comes with net zero and how they can be managed. So that's an area where we are happy to help. And then meta skills, also we've got self-management. So we provided courses about line management. So that's another area where we can help. If you look at land management specifically, then you are looking at skills in husbandry and nutrition, agronomy, what you would expect, carbon capture to land management. And in agriculture, an interesting area is biomass and biofuel, and how you select those biomass and biofuel, and how you exploit those biomass and biofuel. So it's like growing tree with high energy content, So if you were to use it as a biofuel or a biomass, then how can you use it? But it's also involving builders. It's also involving mechanical handling. So think about the trike again. Builders think about the wood as a building constructions. So those are the area where you need the skills. And when there was a sectoral skill assessment made by SDS, then you could see what came up. And the first one is about generic skills. And the top two were generic skill, and it's about budgeting. It's about teamwork, it's about managing people and staff management, and to a much lesser extent about administrative support. But you can see how a lot of those generic skills are coming in, even if it's for agriculture and forestry. And then you've got land use, so it's about land management, it's about biodiversity, it's about management of the quality of all these. It can be quality as a yield, quality as a product that comes out of the management, but also quality as an ETS. How good are we at capturing carbon? And then you've got agriculture, which is about farm management, for example, or habitat management, but also about aquaculture. So those are the skills that people will be looking at in those sectors. But you can see a lot of those skills you will already have as an engineering company. They are not specific to these sectors. The specific area comes later. And where do you get them, those specific areas? Then you can look at specificity in terms of agriculture, in terms of aquaculture, in terms of horticulture. But usually the area you would get them would be the Rural College, Scottish Rural College, SIUC, or you would have the University of Ireland and Islands, which is a conglomerate of various university departments and colleges. And you can get skills start from an NC all the way to a BSc. So that's the area where you can get those specific skills if you're looking at them. And the other area where you can get the skills without bringing them on board, if you're with that's more on the social. The first one was more on the formal. If you think about OSF, we talked about on the job, social and formal. On the social side, you're looking at maybe centres, and there is centres that can support you across the whole of Scotland. And that could be the aquaculture centre, like SAIC, the Scottish Aquaculture Innovation Centre. It could be IBOIC, which is the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre. And they look at the feedstock. Or it could be land use at the James Hutton Institute, for example. So there are places where you can get the skills without bringing the skills in-house if you're interested. And how do you get them, how you find them? So I've talked about Open University, I've talked about SIUC or University of Ireland, but you can also look at things like LANTRA, the Hutton Institute of IBOI Institutes, if you want. And how you fund them, then there are ways to fund them. And I mentioned here the support, for example, you can get, if you go to the Scottish Enterprise Support, you'll find out there is 490, almost 500 options for support. Not all of them in agriculture, not all of them applicable, but it's just to show how much support is available. And almost 100 of those 500 are about funding. So that's a good place to start. And then you may want to find out the skills you need. And that's where you've got support from SDS. And in the concept of no one left behind, one of the concepts is women in rural economy and how you increase the number of women in STEM and the number of women in agriculture and forestry. So there are means to fund those, to get them and to fund them. Other opportunity for funding, and you'll see here, is about young person or young adult and young people. It's about your workforce and its flexibility. It's development, and development, especially in this case of data. We've talked a lot about 4.0 being agriculture, being forestry, being land use 4.0. So, and possibly you've got knowledge transfer partnership, and you've got women in agriculture. So there is a lot of options for a lot of funding is available. So the takeaway from the developed stage, from the skills, then you suppose available for the assessment of the skills and what do you need and what expertise you need to pivot. What do you need to leverage those opportunities? And you see also in terms of funding, there's a big action and there are no one left behind. So young adults, women, apprentices, possibly future technology, big data. So how do you bring all those skills in? So that's what the skill piece is really about, is designing or understanding what you need. And then once you've identified what you need or you don't have or have, and then is how you get them. And in that process, think about no one left behind, think about young adults and apprentices, think about women, that sort of thing. So that's the takeaway from the developed stage. And so now you've developed a vision by discovering your potential innovation. You've defined where you are going to apply that vision and the opportunity you're going to leverage. Having defined that, you've identified the skills you have or don't have and where to go and get them and when do you need them. Now it's about time to put a roadmap together and deliver all these. So in terms of chapter 6 and 7, like every other chapters, to develop a roadmap, really, you've got a choice of standards that can support you in developing that roadmap. And I've talked about the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. There is also a Science-Based Target Initiative, and I've talked a bit more about that. I've mentioned the ISO 14000 series, 464 series, and the PAS. So the advantage of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, Science-Based Target Initiative, those are global standards in their own right. ISO is international, so it's got that global dimension, but ISO is also a recognized organizations. A lot of you would have ISO 9000 or 14000. And the PAS series is a national thing. So we're doing some work on those standards at the moment, especially they all rely on the same principle, which is relevance, completeness, consistency, accuracy, and transparency. All of them are relying on that. And we are doing some work, especially on the top 4 at the moment, which is about the corporate thing. But when you see corporate, it doesn't have to be a big corporation. That would apply to any businesses. But you've also got standards at the project level, and you've got standards on the life cycle levels. So that's helping you developing the roadmap. And if I was going to look at the Science-Based Target Initiative specifically, and if you're thinking about, right, okay, so I'm an organization and I'm not a subsidiary, so I'm the parent company, and I don't work in the oil and gas industry, and I've got less than 500 employees, then what they would suggest is you create a target setting letter. So that's your communication. That's where you tell people what your roadmap is going to be. But interestingly enough, that letter include a commitment to meet the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So you can start seeing how those are linked. So you've got the Greenhouse Gas Protocol linked to the SBTi, which was likely the Greenhouse Gas will also be linked to the ISO and the PAS standards. And the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, as a reminder from the last webinar, was being included into the procurement requirement from the UK government. So you've got standards, and now you need tools, and tools exist. So an example here is a Greenhouse Gas Protocol tool that can be used to match that, addressing all the various scopes. We talked about it. Or you've got the Science-Based Protocol, or Science-Based Initiative, sorry, that also has its own tool, heavily influenced by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So you've got tools available that can be used and those are basically spreadsheet tools. In terms of funding, then once you've identified that roadmap and how can you get funding, so you've got the Scottish Rural Development Programme, for example, which is the farming industry grow. So can you qualify for that? That's what we need to look at. But you've also got various funding in terms of carbon capture, in terms of woodland and peatland, all the actions, the outcomes we talked about earlier on. As I was saying, the outcome drives the policy drives the opportunities, the opportunity drives the funding, and that's what you're seeing here. And it's also the marine through aquaculture. So there are funds available, as I said. Look at that Scottish Enterprise website, which got almost 500 opportunities for support. Once you take away the standards to develop that roadmaps are available, the tools to measure is available. So that should help you achieve that compliance, and funding is available. So what to look at, is create and track a roadmap, and it needs to be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound, and all standards require that through their various principles. They just got all the wording for it, but it's the same thing. Keep it simple, and by that, start with scope 1 and 2, and often those standards like the greenhouse gas or SBTi, scope 3 is actually optional. And it's optional pending its contribution. So if your scope 3 is your biggest source of emission, it's not optional. But if scope 3 is below a given percentage, then it is optional. So start simple and start with scope 1 and 2. And remember, we're here to help. So don't hesitate. We've got a one-to-one program. You can come back to us and we can help either in supporting you on reviewing your roadmap, or supporting you in signposting you to the right people or organizations. So, summary, chapter 6 and 7, we looked at innovations in Scotland, the UK and further afield. And from that, the idea is to go on the road of discovery and develop a vision. And the vision is how do you support those chapters in achieving their ambitions. And that drives the motivation. The motivation is the opportunities, and the opportunities have been, as I said, driven by the outcomes that drive policies, that drive actions, that drive the creation of projects and the release of funding. And that's a defined piece. Once you've got that vision and you've got a customer for that vision, you've got motivation, the question is, do you have the capability to do that, to deliver it? And for delivering it, then that's where you look at skills and the skills you need and where you can access the skills and how you can fund it, how can you get support in getting those skills at a limited cost. And that's the development piece. And once you've put all those three together, then you can develop a roadmap. And to develop a roadmap, then that goes with a vision. Then you can use standards, you can use tools, and again here there are some funding available. So you put a vision, a motivation, capability, and roadmap together, would have an innovation being an invention that sells. So it needs to have added value to be able to sell. So that will conclude this webinar. I think we've been a bit earlier than our 10 o'clock line, but hopefully people can get more time back. But in the meantime, I suppose I think it's time to open the floor.
Yep, I just put something in chat, Eric. So yeah, it does look like we'll finish early, which is useful. Everybody can get some time back, and questions are always welcome. So we'll just hold off for a wee bit to see if anybody's got anything they want to ask. I see Sheena's typing, in which case you but welcome to come off mute and and oh no, it's just a thanks. think that's us. I don't think there's any questions coming, so we can just say thanks everyone for your attention. In terms of upcoming, what's next? Obviously, you mentioned that the one-to-one support is open to anyone who's interested in taking up on that. And in terms of a further webinar, what is our thinking and planning for that?
So I think we've gone through all the chapters through those 4 sections of. I think now is time to turn on his head and probably share information, run webinars, share information for each section across all the chapters.
Okay.
Run each chapter across all the sections. So that will be something we will be doing going forward. And in terms of webinars, then I think there is an interest in standards following the one-to-one we've been having. I think 45 of them at the moment. There seems to be a big question marks about, how do you get on that road and how you measure your progress and how you commit. And one of the ways to do that is using standards, as I explained, because A, they provide the framework, and B, they provide the tools. And I would say C is because the government and organizations are looking at those standards to get, I would say, an auditing trail, something they can stick to. So I suspect that, or no, I don't suspect, I think we'll be doing some webinars more on the standard themselves and what do they offer and how you can leverage those to get where you need to get.
Good. That's ideal. And there's a couple of comments there in chat. So Sheena and Douglas, thanks for that. And Ailsa, absolutely, guidance on the standards and being able to get this up and running would be useful. So yeah, more of what we've been hearing in the one-to-ones. Okay, I think at that then we'll close, let people have the remaining time back for their day. So yeah, thanks all, and yeah, have a good day, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you. Thanks everybody.